Hello there, I'm Stephanie. I don't know what I expected when I stepped into Rhonda's house that afternoon, but it wasn't this. The usual scent of lavender and the hum of her favorite playlist weren't enough to mask the tension hanging in the air. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of what to do, the key still cold in my hand. Rhonda and Ray had been married for 12 years. 12. Everyone knew them as the perfect couple, at least, that's what they were supposed to be. Ray, with his quiet confidence and old-school charm, and Rhonda, so fiercely independent but softened by Ray's unshakable support. They had built a life, a home, and for the longest time, that was enough to make everyone else believe in love. But it was never perfect, not really. I saw the cracks long before anyone else did. Rhonda had always been, well, volatile. One minute, she was radiant, full of fire and ideas, the next, she was a shell, hiding behind books or talking herself into a panic. I remembered the nights she would call me from the bathroom, breath shaky, voice cracking as she begged me to stay on the line. Ray never seemed to notice. Or maybe he did, and he didn't care. I wasn't sure which one bothered me more. Ray had stood by her through all of it, her breakdowns, her dark days when she couldn't get out of bed. He was always the one who pulled her back, who reassured everyone that it was just a phase. "She's getting better," he would say. "You'll see." But this, what I found out, wasn't something that could be chalked up to one of Rhonda's moods. It had been a slip-up. A stupid one. One night, I was looking for something in Rhonda's desk, and I found the message. A phone number, a name, an affair. Simple. Clean. Brutal. I never wanted to know, but now that I did, the anger hit me first. How could she? After everything Ray had done for her? After everything they'd built? The perfect couple. The following day, I walked in, my heart pounding like it had a mind of its own. Rhonda was sitting in the kitchen, her hair loose around her shoulders, the same carefree expression on her face. I hesitated, wondering how I would even start this conversation, but I couldn't hold it in. "You're sleeping with someone else," I blurted, the words sharp, the anger making my hands shake. She froze, her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt. "No," she said, setting the cup down with deliberate calmness, "what are you talking about?" I slammed the paper onto the counter, the name glaring at her. She glanced at it briefly before her gaze snapped back to mine, a smile forced on her lips. "You're mistaken, Steph," she said, her voice too smooth, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. I didn't back down. "You can't lie your way out of this one." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rhonda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I watched her face, waiting for some crack to show. Instead, she sat there, staring at the paper, her hands clenched on the counter. It hit me then, this wasn't just a betrayal of Ray. It was a betrayal of everything she had built around her, this image of strength, of control, of being the one who never needed saving. But the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "You'll never tell him, right?" Rhonda asked, her tone almost mocking. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Rhonda sitting there, pretending she hadn't just ripped apart the life she'd claimed to have with Ray. I was on edge, my mind running in circles, until I finally decided. If she wasn't going to tell him, I would. I had to confront her again, even if I didn't know what would come of it. Rhonda had called earlier, asking me to meet her. I didn't want to, not after what had happened yesterday. But something in her voice, it was cracked, almost desperate, made me agree. I arrived at her place, standing on the doorstep, feeling the weight of every second I'd let pass without telling Ray. Rhonda opened the door, looking nothing like the woman I'd seen just hours ago. Her eyes were red, her face pale, like the anger I'd seen earlier had bled into exhaustion. She led me into the living room, but the air was different now. It wasn't just the tension between us, it was something heavier, something uncertain. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. "I'm sorry, Steph," Rhonda said quietly, wiping her face with a trembling hand. "I never wanted you to find out like this." but I need you to hear me out. I crossed my arms tightly. What do you want me to hear? The truth? Her lips quivered, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the woman who always had an answer, a way to spin things, to make them seem manageable. She was unraveling, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. I've been seeing someone, Rhonda began, her voice breaking. She let out a shaky breath. But it's not what you think. I stared at her, confused, waiting for her to explain. What do you mean it's not what I think? She looked at me, her face a mixture of defiance and something deeper, a resignation that twisted something inside of me. We have an open relationship, Steph. Ray and I. We've had one for years. The words didn't make sense. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. An open relationship? The phrase hung in the air, too strange to feel real. Rhonda nodded slowly, her eyes darting to the floor. We've always talked about it. We've always known, it wasn't working, at least, not for me. Ray's not the problem. I'm the one who's broken. I stared at her, disbelief bubbling in my chest. You've been sleeping with someone else, and Ray knows about it? My voice was rising now, the anger seeping back in, thick and suffocating. How could he just? Ray didn't know at first, Rhonda interrupted, her voice hoarse. I didn't want to hurt him. But he found out eventually. He wasn't happy about it. But we agreed. We made it work. She paused, biting her lip, the weight of her words settling between us. The affair, it's complicated, Steph. But it's not what you think. What do you mean it's not what I think? I couldn't hide the disgust in my voice now. You're sleeping with someone else and you're telling me it's not what I think? Rhonda wiped her eyes, shaking her head. It's not just about the sex. It's about something deeper. I'm broken, Steph. I've been trying to fix it for years. It's not just about Ray not being enough. It's me, too. I'm empty inside. I felt a knot in my stomach. She'd always been like this, hadn't she? Searching for something. Never quite able to find it, no matter how many people stood beside her. And now this. Who is he? I asked, unable to keep the words back. I needed to understand. Rhonda sighed, looking over at the window, her voice growing softer. His name's Michael. He owns a gallery in the city. She faltered for a moment, collecting herself. He's different. He's successful, confident. And he understands me. I shook my head in disbelief. So what? He's making you happy? Is that what you're saying? Rhonda nodded, a faint, almost sad smile tugging at her lips. Yes. It's complicated. But, in a way, it's made me happier. I can't explain it. I know it sounds insane, but it's true. The affair, it's been freeing for me. And, paradoxically, it's helped Ray and I. She let out a shaky breath. We've never been more connected. It's like we understand each other more now, even though it's messy. I stared at her, the words sinking in like stones, each one heavier than the last. You think Ray's okay with this? I think he's not thrilled, but he's learning to accept it, she said, looking back at me. The truth is, Steph, Ray loves me. He wants to keep me. And this is what's keeping us together. I stood there, my heart racing, the knot in my chest only tightening. I couldn't fathom it. How had it all gone so wrong? The next day, Rhonda called again, this time with a request I hadn't expected. Michael wants to meet you, she said, her voice tight. It's important. I didn't want to, but I couldn't say no. Rhonda's desperation was palpable, and I knew if I didn't go, the secrecy would only build, the lies piling higher. I drove to a small cafe downtown, the kind that always felt too quiet for the messiness people came to hide. Michael was waiting at a table near the back, a tall man with sharp features and the kind of presence that made people take notice. He stood as I approached, offering a hand that felt more like a business transaction than a greeting. I sat down, my unease growing. "I don't think you understand what's at stake," he said, his voice low and assured. This thing with Rhonda and Ray, it doesn't have to be hidden. We could go public, let everyone know. No more pretending. It would be a clean break." I stared at him, shocked by his nonchalance. "Go public?" I repeated. "You think Ray would just accept that?" Michael shrugged, unfazed. "Why not? Rhonda deserves to be free. She's been carrying around a weight for too long. You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't know what to say. Rhonda had been hiding behind this facade for years, but going public was a whole other level. I felt the weight of it settle in my chest, a tightness I couldn't escape. "She wants to keep it secret," I said, finally finding my voice. "She's terrified of what Ray would do if he found out. She's afraid of destroying him." Michael's eyes hardened. "That's her choice to make, not his. She's allowed to live her life." I didn't know what to think. Michael was confident, sure, but there was something almost cruel about his certainty. Rhonda, on the other hand, was still caught between the two worlds, Ray's world and this one with Michael. She couldn't choose. After our meeting, I followed Rhonda back to her house, where I noticed the small box on her dresser. She saw me looking at it, the gleam of the diamond pendant inside catching the light. "You shouldn't have it," I said, unable to hold back the disgust in my voice. The pendant was worth more than most people made in a year, a reminder of the life Rhonda was leading behind closed doors. Rhonda's eyes darted to the box, then back to me, her expression guarded. "It's a gift from Michael. It's nothing." Her hands trembled as she shut the drawer, but I could see the truth in her eyes. "This is a mess, Rhonda," I said, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. "You have to end it. You promised." "I will," she said quickly, but her voice cracked. "I've been trying to, I swear. But it's hard." I wasn't sure if she meant ending it with Michael or ending the whole charade with Ray. Either way, she was tangled in something she couldn't untangle on her own. Later, I sat in my car, the heaviness of it all settling in. I'd been caught in this moral dilemma for too long, trying to figure out what the right thing was. I hated what Rhonda was doing to Ray, but I also couldn't deny the shift in her, the way she seemed lighter when she was with Michael. Was it wrong for her to find happiness? Ray, however, would never see it that way. He was possessive, had always been. The idea of an open relationship would never sit well with him. If he knew, he'd burn everything down around them, and Rhonda knew it. "I can't do this," Rhonda had said before I left. "I can't destroy him." But Rhonda was already destroying something, maybe herself, maybe Ray, maybe both. What did I owe her? What did I owe Ray? I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew I couldn't keep carrying this secret. I couldn't sleep that night. The tension between what I knew I had to do and the weight of what it would cost hung heavy in the air. My mind raced, replaying everything, Rhonda's half-explanation, Michael's cold certainty, and the gleam of that damn pendant. It was all too much. I had to tell Ray. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, the phone in my hand, my finger hovering over his contact. It felt like I was about to set off a bomb. But there was no way around it. He deserved to know the truth. Before I could hit call, my phone buzzed. It was Rhonda, of course. She'd been calling nonstop since last night. "Please don't do this," the message read, followed by a flood of others, each one more frantic than the last. "Stephanie, you can't. Ray will never forgive you. He'll never understand." I read each one, my heart twisting. Rhonda was desperate. She knew what would happen once Ray found out. I'd never been the type to back down, but seeing her like this made me pause. It almost felt like betraying her, too. But there was no other choice. I called Ray. It only rang twice before he picked up. "Steph?" His voice sounded off, like he was waiting for something. "What's going on?" I could feel my throat tightening. I took a deep breath. It's about Rhonda, I said. The words came out more slowly than I intended. I have to tell you something. Something you're not going to want to hear. There was silence on the other end, then a quiet, "What is it?" I told him everything, about the affair, about the open relationship, about Michael. Ray's reaction was almost too much to bear. His voice cracked when he asked, "Is this real?" I wanted to say it wasn't, to take it all back, but I couldn't. "I'm sorry, Ray," I said, hearing the words in my own voice, knowing they didn't mean enough to undo what had already been done. The phone went silent again, and I could hear the rawness in his breath. "You're telling me this now," he whispered. "I'm sorry," I said again, my throat thick with guilt. I didn't know what else to say. It was only later, when I heard his parents' voices on the phone, that I realized how far this had gone. They called me immediately after Ray hung up, both shocked and silent. His mother's voice trembled as she asked, "Are you sure about this, Stephanie?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes. I couldn't lie to him anymore. There was a long pause before his father spoke up. "We've always known Ray had a blind spot for Rhonda, but we didn't see this coming." The conversation didn't help, but it did make me realize one thing: despite everything, I had done the right thing. Ray deserved the truth. Later that evening, Ray called me. His voice was quieter now, the shock settling in. "Steph," he said, "I can't even process all this. But I don't know what to do. I think I need to go back home. To the coast. To get away from here. I need time to think." The suggestion was one I had expected, but hearing it made everything feel more final. He wasn't just reeling from the betrayal. He was unraveling. He needed space, distance from everything that reminded him of Rhonda. I didn't respond immediately, unsure of how to feel. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea," I said, finally. "You need time." Rhonda's first message came in shortly after, her words sharp and filled with anger. "You've ruined everything, Steph. You'll never understand what you've done. This is on you." The messages kept coming throughout the evening, each one more venomous than the last. Rhonda was furious, blaming me for everything. And part of me wanted to apologize, to take it all back, but I knew I couldn't. I lay awake that night, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Guilt gnawed at me. Was it my place to tell Ray? Was it worth the pain I'd caused? But no matter how much I doubted myself, the truth remained. Ray needed to know, and I had done the right thing. Even if it cost me everything. Ray and Rhonda's attempt at reconciliation was doomed from the start. They moved back to the coastal town with the hope that the change of scenery would heal what was broken, but it was just a cover-up for the cracks already deep in their marriage. Ray set conditions like he was making business decisions. Rhonda would quit her job, stay home, and rebuild their lives the way he wanted. It didn't take long for the tension to surface. Rhonda, usually so composed, was snapping at small things, her frustration building over Ray's ever-increasing demands. She was losing herself in the process, and everyone could see it. She couldn't be the woman Ray wanted her to be, not without sacrificing too much. But there was nothing she could do. The walls had already been built too high between them. Ray, meanwhile, seemed to grow colder by the day. His expectations were non-negotiable, and he wasn't interested in compromise. Rhonda was slipping away from him, and instead of reaching out to her, he just pushed harder. It was like he didn't know how to love her anymore, only control her. The more he pushed, the more distant she became. Eventually, it all came to a head. Ray came to me, his face set and tired, like he had already accepted the end. "I'm done, Steph," he said quietly, his words cutting through the silence. "I'm filing for divorce." I knew this was coming, but hearing it felt like a punch. Rhonda had no words left to fight him. The affair had shattered everything, and Ray couldn't find a way back to her. He wasn't angry, just empty. There was no more room for her in his life. Rhonda didn't take it well. She called, texted, sent messages in the middle of the night, pleading for another chance, for him to see past the mistakes. But Ray didn't want to hear it. He was done. The man who had always been there for her, who had supported her through the toughest times, had reached his breaking point. She tried to fight, but she was losing. She had made choices that couldn't be undone, and no amount of apologies would fix it. And as much as it hurt me to see her like that, I couldn't stop Ray. I couldn't undo the damage that had been done. He had made his decision, and Rhonda had to face the consequences. I wished there was something I could do, some way to fix it for her. But sometimes, no matter how much you want to help, the only thing left is to watch the destruction unfold.